Hi, everyone. My name is Tandy O'Grady with the St. John's International Women's Film Festival. We're so excited to have you join us for the final installment of our summer screening program, Films Where You're At. Today, we're going to be chatting with the 6 directors behind some of these amazing short films. So thank you all for being here. So we have here with us Lisa Kanako. Lisa, you are the director of the short Glad You're Here. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your film is about?
My film is a personal narrative film. I went through a traumatic event and was just trying to really come to terms with it and find a sense of peace and way forward. So I used 19 years of archival footage from my life and revisited moments, really just to try to make sense of it. And then in the end, I ended up realizing I had to speak something that actually was really unwilling to speak about at the beginning of the process. I made the film. I had gone back to school to do a master's program in doc media at Ryerson, so it was my thesis film. And then I had made a lot of rough cuts where I almost completely avoided talking directly about the topic because I think I was just having a lot of flashbacks of moments that were traumatic. And so in the end, I kind of came to a real sort of tipping point and realized I need to jump off the bridge and really be honest about my experience. So that was the film. It was kind of arduous to put it together. It took like a year of going through my archives and then realizing like, no, I have the right to tell my story, and that I'm not here to be courteous to others when it comes to the reality of what I'd gone through. So yeah.
So your film uncovers a 19-year history of your life. How were you able to sift through all that history and pick what moments were and weren't important in order to tell your story?
Well, like it just kind of came together in small chapters, almost like a puzzle. So I wasn't very much trying to think about it as a large piece, but going through and selecting and putting together each kind of what turned into each section of the film, but without realizing until the end what the order would be. So it was like a sort of an arduous process to just take one drive at a time, go through it. um, some of the moments were super surprising to me. And so the ones that really stood out were the ones that kind of ended up becoming part of the film.
Thank you for sharing that. The Healing Dance, directed by Shailene Johnston, is another film that we have in this screening. Shailene, can you please tell us a little bit more about your film?
Yeah, so my film is called The Healing Dance. It's an animated short, and it's about a young girl named Rosie, who is Anishinaabe Ojibwe, and she is getting ready to dance in her very first powwow. The night before, she learns about the origins of jingle dancing, which is the dance that she's going to do. And when she hears what the dance is meant to be about, she gets a little scared about whether or not she is ready to perform in the dance after all.
So, what made you decide to tell this story through animation? What elements do you think that added to the overall story?
I mean, admittedly, for I've never done animation before, but for some reason I had it in my head that it would be a lot easier. And in some ways it was, because we went into production in February, and I'm not sure how many people in the audience or in the chat have been to a powwow before, but they're predominantly held in the summer because they're outdoors. And we were in Vancouver, and February in Vancouver is rainy and cold and dark, and there was no way that we were going to make a sunny, colorful, bright powwow happen. So I considered animation, and I think that it actually ended up working really well for us because we got to play a lot more with color. We got to make sure that everything turned out in the film very vibrant and bright, and yeah, I think it ended up working out really well for us in the end.
Thank you for that. So we also have here with us Leah Dawes, who is the producer and creator of the short film Tips. Leah, can you please tell us a little bit more about your film?
Sure.
So Tips is it's a story, it's a comedy about a biracial server working in a Caribbean restaurant who confronts the table she has just served in the parking lot of the restaurant after they post a negative review about her hair and her service online. And so she finds out about this review through her boss, and before her table has a chance to leave, she confronts them and um, has a sort of, it starts as a kind of passive aggressive conversation, or a passive conversation where she doesn't confront them directly, but it gradually becomes more and more of a direct confrontation um, about making this table admit that they have posted this review, which they're in denial about having written. So that's, yeah, that's what it's about.
And being the creator and the producer of this project, what approach did you take during the production of the film to make sure the story was told to its fullest capacity?
Yeah. So I am an actor first, and my co-producer Elise Bauman and our director Mercedes Papalia, we all have an acting background. So I always knew that I wanted that to be the focus of what we were creating, because I'm driven by that, and I see through I see and I write through the lens of character. I'm very interested in that. So we knew that in the making of this short that would be our strength, was our interest in arriving at these performances, that it was really about the triangle, the relationships between these three people in this parking lot. And so leading up to that, I think in terms of approach, it was always, you know, what can we do to serve those performances on the day? We only shot it in one night. It was 13 pages shot overnight. So it was a really packed shoot. And so to get there, we just strategized about how we would use time, how we would workshop the script, how we'd rehearse it, because I believe in all those things. So we did all those things to make sure that um, on the day we weren't focused on, you know, any technical focus that needed to be taken care of had its time, but it was supported by a focus that was really about like getting the best performances possible. It wasn't a short that we made that was going to be a particular interest in exploring cinematography or lighting or style. It was, you know, how can we create a world that's about the way these characters are related to one another? And then in terms of editing, it became about, you know, how does that approach adapt in editing too? And I just learned so much from our editor Sabrina Butterman um, about editing really being like the third part of that storytelling, where you caught what you caught by the actors on the day, but then anything you thought was missing kind of becomes, what you thought was a mistake can become such a gem in the way you discover storytelling and editing. So the approach was always adaptive with the resources we had, and leaning on the strengths of what we all brought as a company to the film with an acting focus.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
The Onyx Butterfly is another great short film that we have featured in this screening. It was directed by Yasmin Everin Kerr. Yasmin, please tell us a little bit more about your film.
Yeah, of course. So my short documentary is about a Black male ballet dancer and kind of how he navigates a space that's very white and very feminine, and also just kind of how he pushes against the status quo to be able to express himself and his masculinity. So that's my film.
So, how did you discover Jordan's story? What was it about his story that inspired you to tell it visually?
Yeah. So I also worked with him. So I used to work in retail before I got into film. So we worked together and I was able to find out about his amazing story. I just really wanted to tell it because I thought it was an important story, not just because his story was great, but also that like I wanted to show like other Black boys and young girls to be able to aspire to anything. So yeah, that's why I wanted to do the story.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. Emily Ryder, you are the director of the short documentary Apple Pie and Other Lessons. Can you tell us a little bit more about your film?
Yeah, so my short film is a short documentary about my mom and my aunt's relationship with their grandma, or their mom, my grandma, and how that relationship was kind of colored with my grandmother's experiences with mental health. So it's kind of about like family and food and the complexity of mother-daughter relationships that intersect with mental illness. Um, and it's based around them preparing one of her apple pies, as you get from the title, and preparing Thanksgiving dinner and just reflecting on all they learned from her.
Mhm. So there are many ways you could have brought this story about your family to life. What gravitated you to tell it in an observational way while also using fly on the wall cinematography?
Um, I think I was really interested in capturing just like my mom and my aunt kind of in their element and not in a very necessarily, and my whole family kind of just like living as they are versus trying to kind of like set up things and make it very staged. I just wanted to see everyone kind of in their comfort zone. And it's honestly like such a blessing to have. Now I have the best family home videos I could possibly ask for, just from all the footage that we collected over the 2 days that we shot it. But yeah, I just thought that that would bring out like the most authenticity in the story, just letting them do their thing and me watching from a distance.
Thank you. Lastly, we have here with us Jamie Miller, the director of the short documentary Mervise. Jamie, please tell us a little bit about your film.
Yeah, hi. So Mervise is about if you're not from Newfoundland, you may not understand what the word bise is, but Mervise blends mermaids with bais. We talk about the buddies, boys, whatever, our friends are the bais. So Mervise is following the calendar that was created for charity, for mental health research, and for different organizations in Newfoundland, where men are dressing up as mermaids. And it's really like a beautiful collection of people that they bring into this project. And I really wanted to just tell a story about some of the individual stories within this like overall community portrait. So for example, John is one of the main characters that I follow, one of the main models that I follow. He comes out in his audition process to become a part of the calendar right away, talking about his own mental health, his PTSD and bipolar and anxiety that he lives with. And it's just very much like, this is why I want to be a part of it, to like challenge myself and to like show that, there's many different versions of being a man, and it's not always just the cold, hard side that we always put out there. And same with Sheldon, has a physical disability, and he is building this new kind of relationship with his body kind of during the process. He hasn't taken his shirt off in front of people before. And Jason slash Queen Irma Gerd is a drag queen and a queer activist in Newfoundland, and is one of the first drag queens that's featured in this calendar this year. So it really is a like kind of vast look at masculinity and acceptance and like loving yourself, and how that can help you love the community around you. And so we talk about it's interesting because so many other issues come up within that, like talking about racism or talking about disability justice or whatever. That's not, those are different kind of branches, but they all end up kind of playing into the same sort of system of like what we expect of men and gender roles and sexuality. And you really, I don't know, the nice thing about the film is that and the project in general, is that we see a lot of these intersections, not just in like feminism activism, but like, I mean, this is a part of feminism, like it's all connected to each other. So yeah, so it's a complex story of sweet men, mermaid tales.
So, like you just described there are a lot of different characters in this film, all with different stories to tell. how were you able to capture everyone's story equally, but then bring it all together cohesively illustrate what modern masculinity looks like in Newfoundland?
Yeah, I mean, it was really difficult. It was surprising, like, because you know, we went into the process really, like, kind of experimentally figuring out how we would follow it. I ended up they wanted to do an audition process in person because they hadn't done that before, and that worked really well with hand in hand with the film, so we could film it, you know, like one of those audition show styles, and everybody came in and sat down and kind of talked about why they wanted to be a part of what the Merbais were doing, and so that allowed me to like get to meet some of the potential stories that I could follow. And then I interviewed after that, I went and interviewed about like 9 of them on their own terms, like in their homes, just to like see how they were with talking to camera and opening up. And the problem was like everybody was so interesting. Everybody was so wonderful. It was really hard to figure out what avenues to go and like who would play well with each other, and really how to filter, like try to keep the story focused, because as I was saying before, like there's so many layers to it that I discovered. And I mean, I yeah, it just kind of came out that like you know, John was just really emotionally, he was ready to be vulnerable, which I found like so sweet, because he does, you know, at first appear like this kind of like big, like manly man sort of, you know, facade that people put out there. And so just that kind of emotional connection we had when doing an interview, I just kind of followed that instinct. And like Irma Gerd, the Jason, he just spoke so well. They're such a beautiful person when like talking about gender and their own fluidity with like on the gender spectrum, and but talking about it in a way that was really accessible. At least I found, and I think all of them talk about um, um, gender and identity in a way that's they're using their own language, but trying to be as open-minded and as welcoming as possible. And so so yeah, it was really just following, like trying to spend a bit of time with each of them that I could, trying to follow those instincts of like, okay, this is something I'm feeling emotionally drawn to, and so I think other people will too. um, and and then just trying to like visually capture some of the like textures and colors and like and whatever that kind of summed up some of the feeling I think that people experience being a part of that community, and that event. And what I think, just the last thing I want to touch on is that what I found really important about the calendar project was that it was, you know, this thing that was showing up in all corners of not just like rural Newfoundland, but like across Canada and in other parts of the world. Like it was internationally being ordered. And so the potential for like all these different types of people to enter into the homes of people in small towns, and in this friendly, fun, silly way, it actually would like open them up to a conversation they didn't know that they might have. So I really wanted to try to just expand on that, by delving into it with individual focused stories too.
Thank you for sharing that. So the final question I have for all you guys actually is, what do you hope the viewers would take away from watching your film? And we can start with you, Lisa.
I feel when it came to my film that I maybe had wanted to hear this story that I was telling before going through this experience, to have a sense maybe of what was coming down the road towards me, or how I might have maybe better processed it or persevered through it. So I feel that if anything, it's just to make people feel that are in this same situation, that they're not alone. Yeah.
And how about you, Leah?
I think tips
on the surface is so obviously a comedy, and that was intentional. I love comedy, but we also were trying to, I was trying to explore and sort of Trojan horse these ideas that are about the way that our phones and the identities that we have on our phones and online, and the reactionary way with which we respond to things. We post online, we can write just about anything, and it can give us a feeling of, it can feel like a kind of empowerment or a kind of confidence in knowing who we are. Um, but then when we're face to face with, in a confrontation, at least in my experience, it's so easy to lie, or it's so easy to hide and deny the things that I have purported I believe in or I've said online. And so there's a contradiction there sometimes between what the image I present about myself on my phone, on Instagram, on these apps, when I can write reviews, and then who I am in person. And that was something that I think I was just beginning to be more and more interested in, and becomes more and more of interest to me as a person living in this hyper digital age. And I say that to not discount the incredible empowerment that people have found when they reflect on who they are and decide to share that message with the world. But this is different. What I'm talking about is the way that we're reactionary, the way that we speed through quick decision making in our little digital worlds, and we don't often have the same level of accountability in real life. And I'm interested in why it feels easier to do that online than in real life. So I'm hoping that tips might also make other people curious about that.
Thank you. What about you, Shaylin?
Yeah, so for me, I'm half Anishinaabe on my mom's side, and when I was growing up, I didn't know a whole lot about like my culture and my roots and where I come from, and so writing and film has been an entryway for me to delve more into my culture. And then it's also really important for me to share what it is that I'm learning with other people who are non-Indigenous, but also it's really important for me to share stories with people who are also Indigenous and who grew up like I did, who didn't know a lot about their roots and where they come from, and are on that same journey of learning more about like their family history and their culture. So for me, a takeaway from the healing dance is that one, that it educates on this particular type of powwow dancing, but also that it inspires young viewers who are watching, especially little Indigenous youth, to get involved in dancing and to learn more about their culture that way. And yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is just education, that somebody watches the film and walks away saying, oh, I know a little bit more now. That's great.
Thank you. What about you, Yasmin? What do you hope viewers would take away from watching your film?
Yeah, I'm gonna I think, a little bit piggyback off of Shaylin. I thought her answer was beautiful. I thought all the answers were beautiful so far. But I have to say that, like, with filmmaking as well, for me, it has brought me closer into my Blackness. I feel like every film that I make is kind of uncovering another side to my Blackness for me. So I think for this film, really what I want people to take away from this is like talking about gender, talking about masculinity, and also talking about how we all have both masculine and feminine energy within us, and that it's all right to explore different things. And yeah, I just hope there's more conversations like that, especially within the Black community. And as well as, yeah, for little Black boys and girls to see this and be like, yeah, I want to get into ballet, or I want to try something different that maybe in our gender, or what people have told us about our gender that we shouldn't do. So yeah, that's mainly it.
Thank you. Emily, what do you hope viewers would take away from watching your film?
I guess one of the things that we kind of reflect on in the film is how life just never stops getting busy. And, you know, you grow up, you start your own family, you never stop kind of just moving forward with life. And making the film was a chance for my mom and my aunt to stop and pause for the first time, like ever, and think about their relationship with their mom. And it was a really beautiful experience for all of us. And so I hope that that can be something for the audience too, to have even just a few moments afterwards to like kind of like take a breath and just think about their relationships with and the important people in their life that raised them.
Yeah, definitely. Lastly, Jamie, what do you hope viewers would take away from watching your film?
Yeah, I mean, very connected to what Yasmin was just saying about, you know, thinking about gender and masculinity and femininity in different ways, and like having fun and allowing yourself to play and be silly with that. Like, I think looking at the joy and the friendship that comes out of these people just kind of like grassroots putting this project together and throwing glitter on their face, and like community members like designing these amazing beautiful tales and playing with, I mean, they're really playing with the masculinity and femininity within themselves, and all that is tied to that. And I think just showing that there's a space for you to exist no matter how you want to exist. There will be room, and there will be other people who will embrace you. Going back to thinking about this calendar existing in some rural community's home, like if there's a queer kid in small town Newfoundland who sees this and is thinking like, oh, well, maybe I can live in Newfoundland and be myself and not feel like I'm going to have to hide parts of who I am. Like, that's what's really exciting about projects like this. And I think that revolution of self-love is like one of the most important things we can all work on, and to actually create like a wider revolution around the world, like radical care. And I think this is like a small, maybe not super radical project per se, but it's a small step in that direction of radical self-love. And yeah, I hope people like are able to start thinking about that in small ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was such like a diverse amount of amazing short films. I'm sure all the viewers at home would truly enjoy the final screening of Films Where You're At. So thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you to our funders as well. And to tune in, be sure to reserve your free tickets at womensfilmfestival.com.